A violet pillar of light pierces the night mist. It was a disaster that no one could avoid. On the day when the spatial gates leading to another world opened, hideous monsters, terrifying by their very appearance, set foot on Earth, and there was not a drop of humanity in them. People have finally lost hope not only for a peaceful existence, but also for the continuation of life. But an unprecedented miracle has happened. Constellations are beings who have surpassed humans in strength. If people had not enlisted the support of constellations in the fight against monsters, who, without any regret or fear, slaughtered monsters, then humanity would have suffered defeat. But, as happens with people endowed with power, not all constellations were friendly. There were also evil ones among them, who use people for their own purposes and abandon people like outdated things. A system message appears that informs that in the next life a contract will be signed with a less hostile constellation than the sword god of the central plains. The guy inhales the air, as if he has been strangled for a long time, and wakes up in a cave with traces of blood on his face. He thought it was just a fog cave, but it turned out that the fog was poisonous. Coughing up blood, he says that not a word was written about in the summary. The guy stretches his hand to the ceiling of the cave. The world mercilessly blurs in his eyes. Is his life going to end just like that? He's only an F-class player, but the guy really wanted to save if not the whole world, then at least one single person, as his parents once did. Is it just death now? The sword god of the central plains doesn't help anymore anyway, so it doesn't matter what happens next. The system reports that God is laughing at the player, because those who have an F-class must die according to their position. The guy, it turns out, still has the strength to shout insults in the direction of this worthless assistant, and show him the middle finger. God can only think about what kind of F-class jerk he got. But suddenly a blue light illuminates the walls of the cave, and the system writes that a new constellation has sealed the player's mouth. What's going on here? What is the new constellation? The guy closes his eyes, preparing to die. But a new constellation, like an angry ghost, asks if he wants to live. Of course he wants to. Constellation asks a new question. Will the player want to live, even if he has to start from the beginning? If there is no other choice, then such conditions will suit. On his last breath, the guy whispers that he wants to live. The ceiling of the stone cave breaks and bright daylight penetrates into it. Purple lightning pierces the player's body, lifting his top. The next second he wakes up in a sunny room, dressed in a tracksuit. Looking around, the conclusion quickly arises that this is his room. Turning on the phone, which had been lying peacefully nearby, the guy sees that the date on the display is September 1st, 2020. The time is the seed of the morning, rebirth day. It turns out that this is the past. The guy calmly exhales. Everything that happened now seems like a dream. But then a new constellation appears in front of him, who happily says that he really came to life. He really went back 3 years ago, calling the constellation not very flatteringly. He asks if he is the god of the sword of the central valleys. Whether he came to life or not, I don't care. This little cloud was too arrogant and believed in itself. The guy remembers the words about how F-class players should die and asks the constellation to go out the window. However, the cloud begins to get angry and orders not to compare it with such a pathetic creature. It will never descend to the level of the sword god of the central valleys. The guy awkwardly scratches his head, almost regretting that he spoke so rudely to a new acquaintance. In that case, who is flying in front of him? The constellation, still angry, replies that it doesn't matter. Then what matters? A cloud begins to fly around the room, telling what matters. It's even more pleasant for him to be in a pig's kennel. Let him just look at this mess. He can get sick. This constellation grumbles a lot, as the player notes. Looking at the photo with his parents, he realizes that it reminds him very much of someone. The guy asks what the constellation's name is, but the cloud does not give his name. Between them, the knowledge of the nickname is optional. It's strange. Usually constellations call their nicknames instead of their real name, but this one says it's optional. Although this is wrong, however, the player turns out to be an exception. Constellation modifies the notification system. Then the name of the constellation changes, as does the name of the legal guardian. The guy stands in shock, not knowing what to do with all this. The cloud begins to spin and now the outlines of a girl loom in front of him. Co-star Song Hyun-seok greets the player and calls him son. The guy can't help but see his mother, a C-class player, in this new look. The constellation scolds him for not recognizing his own mother. But how so? The guy asks to provide convincing proof that this cloud is really his mother. Hyun-seok draws attention to a photo that was taken during a family trip to an amusement park. The co-star asks if her son continues to buy ice cream first thing when he comes to the park. Hwang Jae-min begins to recall a bunch of memories from the player's childhood and youth, how the guy wore diapers at the age of 7, how he choked on seaweed soup, and she climbed out of his nose, and then we ask a bunch of questions about the health and condition of the guy. But he still doesn't believe. How can this Constellation be his mother? The guy remembers that when the parent returned from home, she always cooked his favorite dish. Constellation immediately sends his son a sponsored item. Almost immediately, bread with honey appears in front of him. The toast turns out to be exactly cooked, as mom did. Tears come to my eyes. So is it really his mother? Hwang Jae-min says through a system message that he feels guilty and regrets such a late event. Tears are already pouring down the cheeks of the player. He missed her very much. The Constellation responds that it experiences the same thing. However, very quickly Hwang Jae-min says that the time for tears about family reunification is over, which really angers her son. They haven't seen each other for so long, and he can't even cry enough. Hwang Jae-min, with his arms crossed over his chest, asks if he wants to start a new life. He has to reach at least C class. The Constellation already has plans for the kid. They consist of turning the son from an F-class player into a C-class player, and this throws the guy into shock. Was she seriously talking about this now? Hwang Jae-min demands that he get down to business right now, rejecting his unnecessary doubts. First of all, the player licks the whole apartment under the guidance of his mother. The first task, to get out, has been successfully completed. He takes a break and asks Hwang Jae-min how she became a co-star. She proudly replies that it's all thanks to the fact that her achievements have been noticed. Although Hwang Jae-min was only a beginner, she advanced faster than his father. The guy opens his eyes. Has dad also become a Constellation? The woman looks up at this and asks if he has really forgotten who his parents are. But how can you forget that? They are C-class players who sacrifice themselves in the name of saving humanity. They must have the qualities necessary for the Constellation. Hwang Jae-min begins to feel sad, because the meeting with his father will not happen soon. It's probably not easy for him either. To support his son, the Constellation gives him a sponsor's gift, and out of nowhere is a vitamin of love, information about which is not available due to sponsorship intervention. The vitamin looks somehow suspicious, and Hwang Jae-min is dissatisfied with his belief that a mother is able to give her son something like this. Constellation smiles gently and informs that he will feel the effect of vitamins immediately after taking. Outside the window, a huge asteroid is flying straight into the Dream family's house, but the guy doesn't notice it. He swallows a vitamin, and at the same moment something that fell from the sky breaks through the window and wall. On the first day, something destroyed their scrap. The Constellation starts to get angry that after such a thorough cleaning, it's a mess again. But is it worth worrying about? Because of the dust, it becomes impossible to breathe. And then the guy goes out onto the destroyed balcony. There he sees huge green monsters running down the street with clubs in their hands, looking like trolls. The player thinks that he is very lucky not to die at their hands. He promises himself that he will not repeat his untimely death and turns around to get to the shelter. But he meets the eyes of a message from his mother, who is excited about this opportunity to prove herself. She believes in his strength and wants to successfully finish off the monsters. With a headache, her son remembers how in a previous life such a walking creature kicked his ass. Hwang Jae-min continues to insist, and then the guy decides to demonstrate his worthless abilities. He hits the thing that fell into his house and says that he can't even break it, but breaks off in mid-sentence. An object that looks like a piece of stone crumbles and creates an even bigger mess in the apartment. Did he succeed? The Constellation shrugs and says that he has become so strong thanks to vitamins. She recommends focusing and using mana. The guy calls on his power, and now there is so much of it that he even flies up a little bit, surrounded by a blue glow. What was it about those vitamins? Having called up the information window, he reads about his data, but most of what is written does not understand. His name is written in the window, Hwang Jae-min. The information is still unavailable due to sponsorship interference. Jae-min looks at his mother and says that the level of his abilities has not changed. In that case, where does this power come from? Hwang Jae-min winks and promises to tell after his son kills these monsters. Jae-min's transformation from an F-class player to a C, Step 2, begins. There is complete confusion on the streets. People are trying to escape from monsters, waiting for the players to arrive. At this rate, they're all going to die here. The girl stumbles over her own foot and falls. The monster raises a baton over her and does not listen to the pleas that she does not want to die. But suddenly the blue mana arrives with a powerful blow at the monster, and he bends over, putting his hand to the bruise. Hyun-seok watches his son with interest, and he asks the fallen girl to run for cover as soon as possible. The Constellation says that Jae-min needs to trample this monster into the dirt, and how can a guy disobey her? He jumps on the monster, hitting his knees on the chin, and it falls. The monster is still conscious, so Jae-min steps on his vile face with huge fangs sticking out of his mouth. Hyun-seok is elated. It was a great hit. Jae-min picks up the baton that has fallen out of the troll's hands and is surprised to find that it is not heavy at all, although it seems quite weighty. Is it all because of the action of vitamins? The monster's companions decide to avenge their comrade. The Constellation notes that there are still many monsters around that need to be dealt with. The guy asks her not to worry about such a trifle. There is confidence in his voice. In a previous life, he would really have been defeated very quickly, but now everything is completely different. The forces are already on a different level. Jae-min throws a stone picked up from the ground at the troll and hits it exactly in the kneecap. After that, he runs away and hits with a baton with all his might. When a monster falls, the player receives advice from his mother. It would be better not to use weapons, but to take monsters with his bare hands. The guy understands why it will be better this way. Fists will get to the goal faster than some kind of stick. He throws it into a crowd of monsters and hits the spine of one of them. The monsters growl with rage, and Jae-min adds fuel to the fire, shouts for them to come closer. The player activates the skill gain within 10 minutes. His strength will be increased by 5%. Hyun-seok behind his back spiritually guides his son, and you can see how similar they are to each other, especially with their eyes. A bunch of monsters are running with batons at Jae-min, who looks very small compared to them. He deals with all of them very quickly. Every opponent lies at his feet and can barely move. There is just a little bit left before a complete victory. Suddenly, a huge axe flies from the back at Jae-min, which, fortunately, misses. His master turns out to be a troll, which is bigger than the others, and also with a huge horn in his forehead. The axe returns to his hand, and now he is ready to attack. The boss must be. Jae-min runs up and hits him in the face with his knee, and then, being on top, attacks on the back of the head. He will make this beast pay for the pogrom and for the fact that he will have to clean up the apartment again. The player plunges his hand into the monster's back and green blood begins to gush from there. The troll falls, and the Constellation jumps joyfully. The task is completed. Jae-min doesn't say anything. He is overcome with surprise that he has coped with this small army of monsters by himself. People who, before his appearance, despaired and said goodbye to their lives, begin to applaud. So that's what it's like to be the center of attention. An incredible feeling, actually. Jae-min lets you enjoy this moment for a couple more seconds. Hyun-seok says he is proud of his son, and now it's time to tell him about vitamins, and the guy immediately demands to give him all the information. A pill made from ginseng powder, which grows on the back hill of the main part, not only prolongs life, but also gives strength to the fighter consuming it. After consumption, all the basic characteristics increase fourfold. Jae-min has never heard of ginseng powder. After checking his indicators again, which were now not hidden by the Constellation, the guy realizes that he would be suitable for a beginner of the C-class. In this case, Jae-min asks his mother to share a C-class weapon, but she categorically replies that he may not even dream of it. The reason for the refusal is simple. Although she loves him, she does not want to spoil him, but Jae-min immediately reminds about 10-year-old ginseng. Hyun-seok awkwardly admits that she spent all the divine coins on the powder, and to get them you need to do some work. But even if she tells, the player still won't understand. Their conversation is interrupted by a car with a police sirena on the roof. This is a detachment called Volt, which is responsible for security in the city. But ordinary people are dissatisfied with their arrival, as they arrive too late. An important-looking guy in a suit gets out of the car, who immediately starts scolding Jae-min. He says there are rules that citizens must follow. Why did this guy interfere if the area is under someone else's responsibility? Jae-min is completely unhappy that he has to listen to lectures from such a person. Maybe he should kick his ass right now. Hyun-seok is completely unhappy that her son is going to fight with this guy in front of strangers. After his mother's words, Jae-min quickly turns from anger to mercy and says with a smile that he should be thanked for the work done. However, he apparently asks too much from such a person, and the interlocutor gets angry. What is he talking about? The player instructively puts his hand on his shoulder and lets him go to all four sides. Today is a day off after all. The guy immediately demands to tell his name and the name of the squad. But since Jae-min is not a member anywhere, he has nothing to answer. He also admits that he has recently been reborn. Then the interlocutor gives him a business card Volta, very impressed that the newcomer has such outstanding powers. He apologizes to Jae-min because he was too blinded by greed, but the player does not seem to be particularly offended. The guy invites him to join his squad, and Jae-min can only be amazed that the opinion of the person from Volt about him changes before the player has time to blink. However, the guy tears up the business card and scatters its remnants through the air. The interlocutor turns out to be very enraged by such boorish behavior, and Jae-min asks in amazement if this player is trying to hit him, an ordinary citizen. The guy asks not to compose fairy tales here. The person in front of him definitely can't be an ordinary person. But officially, Jae-min is not registered anywhere, so, in fact, he is not a player at all. The interlocutor leaves, but promises to return, and the guy continues to accept honors and praise from ordinary people. Jae-min calls the gaming association and asks for help in cleaning up with the corpses. Hyun-seok nods contentedly at his son's actions. She blushes and says that she is motherly proud, and is also going to borrow some divine coins from familiar constellations. Before he can stop her, surprised by such a sudden impulse, the constellation disappears and asks to wait for her a little. Jae-min looks back at his destroyed house, but before he begins to grieve about it, two sisters approach him from behind, one of whom turns out to be the girl he saved. His sister invites him to dinner in gratitude for the rescue, but the guy politely refuses. Looking closer, he suddenly realizes that the sister of the rescued seems vaguely familiar to him. However, Jae-min doesn't remember where he saw her. Luli from the association arrive, and the guy needs to leave already, but the stranger manages to slip a piece of paper into his hands, saying that this is her number. Unfolding it, Jae-min does not find a number there, but there is something more interesting in it. It is written on paper that the girl, Jae-yun, is from the Mad Dog clan, and she urges to contact her later. That's why her face seemed so familiar. This is the demoness Jae-yun, who will kill all the members of her squad in a year. She waves him one last time, and the player stands and wonders how such a cute girl could become a demon. The men from the association ask to show the young man their game ID, but since he was reborn this morning, he simply does not exist. Agents hardly believe it. He was reborn recently, but he alone coped with such opponents. Jae-min just couldn't do that. The guy notices a suppression device equipped with an electric shock on the agent's hand and realizes that they are going to catch him. How can he be considered a criminal? Hyun-seok, who has returned, is also amazed by what is happening. She didn't manage to get a lot of divine coins. There are only a handful of old people around. When the agent notices that the guy starts talking to the constellation, he immediately attacks with an electric hand. Jae-min dodges, and then the agents report that they will have to take action if he continues to behave inappropriately. Hyun-seok reports that there is an item that can erase memory. She asks if he wants to use it, even though they don't have divine coins. However, Jae-min sees no point in spending such a thing on these guys. Before the arrest is made, the player asks to give him a call. It's not a problem after all, is it? He calls his trustee and tells him that nothing special, in general, has happened. He has just been reborn today. Furious screams immediately start pouring out of the tube. Jae-min walks back and forth from excitement, trying to make the situation clear. The guy switches the video call and brings the phone to the agents' faces. The man on the screen introduces himself as the president of the gaming association, and Jae-min rejoices. That's the power of connections. In his office, President Lee Tae-ho was bursting with screams at the guy. He had just been reborn, and already went to the A-class monsters. If his mother had been here, she would have called Tae-ho an irresponsible jerk. There was no doubt about that. Hyun-seok laughs loudly, because the hair on the president's head has become even less. Oh, she will definitely find him some medicine for alopecia. Jae-min remembers the day when the president became his guardian. Hyun-seok asked the boy to stay and play with his uncle, promising to return soon. When she left, she said in an almost commanding tone to take care of her son. At that time, Jae-min could not even think that his mother's friend would become his guardian. Tae-ho is dissatisfied with what is being broadcast on television. An unknown player in the Gwango area defeated the squad in just 10 minutes. Did the president ask him not to get out? Tae-ho asks the name of the constellation Jae-min. If a guy admits that it's his mother, then they probably won't believe him, because he gives out the first thing that comes to mind. He calls his assistant the sword god of the Central Valleys. The president thinks that this constellation must be respected. Tae-ho decides to postpone the conversation. He hopes so much that the guy would not follow in the footsteps of his parents and would live an ordinary life. Jae-min needs to get a pass card, however. He is very clearly aware that Tae-ho will try to stop him. He knows that the president is worried, so he decides to offer him something. There is cyberspace in the association. The guy is ready to show what he is capable of. T-Ho is not impressed by his impulse, just reborn, and already climbs there. Let him go train on the orcs. However, the secretary standing next to him takes the side of the president's ward and says that he can be given a chance. T-Ho, though angry at her, however, allows the young man to go there, but only on condition that he will not complain later. Jae-min lies down in the capsule, and the president warns that there will be 5 waves. If he copes, he will become a player. If not, Hwang Jae-min shakes his head, repeating what he said as a sure sign of aging. The player puts on a helmet. He connects to cyberspace and waits for the simulation to happen. Jae-min's consciousness connects to the character. 3 minutes before the start of the first wave, the player is offered to choose a weapon: a spear, a different type of sword, and a sickle with a shield. Want to choose? Wielding a sickle won't be easy, but what about a shield? A sword or a spear may also be suitable. Hwang Jae-min is surprised by the unexpected choice of weapons. She wishes him all the best and offers him to choose any weapon. The guy thought for a long time, but still grabbed his sword. He asks her what she was talking about, and the Constellation happily replies that she gave him a talent. Hwang Jae-min passes Jae-min a talent pill containing her power. When he sees that the pill resembles vitamins, he decides to open an information window. The skill you can't escape from genes is passive. This is a crystal pill that contains the talent of the Constellation that people once praised as the god of war. After absorption, the ability to wield any weapon increases greatly. The first wave begins. It is required to defeat all the monsters on the battlefield for a certain period of time. In front of Jae-min are green gremlins with big ears and small clubs in their hands. The time for the battle is 60 seconds. It looks simple enough even for the first level, just to slay goblins. However, here a big monster grows up behind the little ones, which, apparently, is the boss. First of all, the player decides to take a pill, but after swallowing it, he is surprised to realize that he does not feel any changes in himself. Constellation smiles, saying that the effect cannot be felt if you do not have enough experience. Meanwhile, the goblins decide to attack at once. The guy easily cuts up all 3 attackers with a sword. Lowering the sword, the system reports that the talent manifests itself 100%. He has successfully adopted Song Hwang Jae-min's talent. Jae-min himself can't help but notice this. He began to move quite differently. This is a real talent to wield a sword like that. The Constellation is proud of the guy and says that it's great, because they are relatives. It's time to start the boss battle. The president oversees the course of the test. The 4th wave ends, and the time comes for the 5th. The workers next to T-Ho believe that Mr. Hwang Jae-min is not lower than B class. Yes, he pulls on the A class, it's just incredible. He wonders why this fool fights so well. It's just amazing how easily he coped with the boss. To kill such an orc, you need at least a C-class squad. A man looks at a boy and sees his mother in him. Breathing, habits, swordsmanship. But she couldn't have trained Jae-min. She sacrificed her life in the name of humanity when the boy was barely 10. At that time, Jae-min was an ordinary child. So this guy is just talented. T-Ho didn't think he would be so good. A man understands that there is no escape from genes. He asks Hwang Jae-min a question. Although he knows that she will not answer him, what should he do with her talented son? Jae-min says something is missing. When the president is interested in what, the guy replies that he fought hard, but received only approval. It's not enough for him. He asks to add 5 more waves, and the hair on the director's head almost stands on end. 5 more. Jae-min asks if he will give him the C-class equipment forever, of course, if he copes with this task. This is a pretty serious reward, so if he fails, then it will be possible to admit that he did not pass the 5th wave. Pretty fair, right? The president thinks deeply about whether it is possible to achieve such heights on the day of rebirth, but talent does not always guarantee survival. On the battlefield, you can always meet monsters that are able to destroy everything in the neighborhood with a single breath of wind, like Hermanon, for example. T-Ho can't let a ward become a player. That's not what Hyuk Song asked him to do. The president recalls his workers for a few words. Jae-min understands that he needs time to respond, and therefore waits patiently. Maybe asking for a C-class weapon was too much. Although no, now is the most suitable option to get it. Finally, T-Ho arrives and agrees to the guy's terms. However, there will be some adjustments. Jae-min doesn't have to wait for the 10th wave. If he can defeat all the monsters that will appear now, then he is free to ask the Guardian for whatever his heart desires. The guy does not have time to ask what kind of monster, as a black hole appears. Constellation is angry, because you could just refuse and not cheat so dirty. The B-class boss, a huge 3-headed Cerberus, appears from the hole. Yi-min shouts that there has been some mistake, but the president just wishes him good luck. Would he really have to fight such a strong opponent? Well, the old man did it. Cerberus brings his huge paw, capable of crushing a guy. Yi-min jumps back. Taeho could just refuse, why make such a show? Cerberus releases a column of fire from its mouth directly in the direction of the player, knocking him down. Just how crazy is it? How should Yi-min take him down? Hyun-seok says she finally remembered something. Although she needed to strain her memory very hard, she reports that she has already killed Cerberus in the past and knows how to do it. In that case, let him tell us soon. The Constellation offers to attract the monster's attention by throwing an object at him. But Yi-min is in no hurry to perform the action. She seriously offers him to play with him like with some dog. However, the guy doesn't have much choice. He cannot throw a sword at the monster, because if nothing happens, then he will die the death of the brave. In that case, maybe gloves will do. He pulls one off his shoulder and throws it like a toy for a puppy. Yi-min immediately squints, not wanting to watch what follows next. And suddenly, the dog's barking stops. Did it really work? The player freezes. These are the techniques used against B-class monsters. The Constellation laughs, because she is a dog in Africa, no matter how intimidating she looks. Does this mean that Cerberus will bring the captured object to the owner? It is already possible to work with this. Hyun-seok says that the most vulnerable part of the monster is on the left crown. You can kill him with one blow. Yi-min jumps on top of the dog and aims at the left crown. For monsters, this place is like a second heart. The skin in this place is thin enough, so even the guy's strength is enough to break his head. Just before the blow, Yi-min uses reinforcement. The player exits the virtual space, and the president immediately chastises the guy for being dishonest. However, Taeho was the first to try to cheat. Why send Cerberus? The president admits with a heavy heart that he thought Yi-min would not be able to cope. He asks the guardian if he wants to tell him something, and the president replies that so be it, he can become a player. But there's something else, isn't there? Through his teeth, Taeho allows the ward to take any equipment. Actually, this privilege is available only to A-class players, but the word is not a sparrow. Constellation wants to choose new equipment as soon as possible. Yi-min is as excited as his mother. The guards tense up at the sight of the president, and the player impressively declares that he can cope without his help, so the man can go. But Taeho can't leave him here. An important person for him chooses a new outfit. He must accompany him. Besides, the president has something to advise. The young man can trust him. The guards behind his back are whispering that Taeho is the same guy from the news. The president orders all the equipment to be brought, which is what it is, and the subordinate does it reluctantly. Didn't he himself say that he would open access only in a special case? Another replies that this is a special case. Taeho asks the player not to linger here. For Yi-min, there is only one truly valuable item. Hyun-seok warns that the old man may have vision problems due to illness. She also urges her son to take a look at the curved sword of the owner of the floats. Constellation highly recommends this weapon. At the same time, Taeho advises something completely different, which does not allow you to concentrate at all. Yi-min has already taken a look at something else. In a previous life, I watched an interview on TV with a man who became famous thanks to a lucky coincidence. Yi-min was envious. Lee Chang-yek, the man who was interviewed, took the almost completely broken weapon from his friend. No one could have thought that it was actually a valuable item. He was just as new as Yi-min, but at one point his life changed dramatically. No matter how much time passed, the guy could not forget. He kept envying him. The player takes a short sword, and the president behind him opens his mouth in surprise. This garbage was going to be thrown away. The ward replies that in this case, it was lucky that they didn't throw it out. He will take care of this weapon himself. Hyun-seok is terribly angry. She tells him to put the sword back in its place immediately. But the young man made his choice. The president asks to come to his senses. He fought Cerberus with such difficulty. Even though he has vision problems, he saw everything perfectly. The Constellation is looking for the best pair of glasses in the Hall of Honor. Yi-min asks his guardian to lend him a car, and the president does not resist anything anymore. He just sinks into longing for this guy's mother, who was at least a little more reasonable. The driver brings the guy to some desolate place. Yi-min asks his mother to stop worrying so much. It's a good weapon, but Hyun-seok continues to doubt it. Had she forgotten that he had been reborn? The player tells that this weapon was supposed to belong to Lee Chan-young. Thanks to him, he can become an A-class player. Will she believe it? He asks the Constellation with what, in her opinion, it is possible to move forward faster than the answer, and he himself answers his question. With the help of objects, of course. Hyun-seok still doesn't understand. Yi-min continues to talk about how he always wanted to know what it's like to have a powerful weapon. Soon he will reach a class. The constellation asks why he is climbing the mountain. The guy vaguely replies that she will find out soon. He stops, saying that the place the guy is looking for should be somewhere here. Found it. A golden dot is burning in the tree. Jae-min explains that this is not just a random portal, it is a variation portal with a special shape, location and mana level. Jae-min already feels like he's starting to attract him. Reaching out his hand, he suddenly realizes that he feels someone else's energy. Someone's loud voice orders him to stand still. A group of men in the same uniform comes out of the forest, and in front of them is a commander in a classic suit. It was the same person who had chastised Jae-min for fighting trolls. He also asks if this bastard is surprised by their appearance. These guys used invisibility skills, so they've been chasing the guy all this time. Jae-min angrily thinks that his stats are still too low since he didn't feel the presence of these guys. Hyun-seok encourages him. The player will become stronger very soon. The man in the suit calls Jae-min an arrogant pig, because of which his squad was disgraced. The player doesn't even understand who is standing in front of him. Does he have a memory like a fish? They saw each other this morning. Jae-min still doesn't remember. He asks his mother if she has any memories of him, but she just shrugs and says she doesn't know him, but concludes that this person has absolutely no sense of tact. The man reminds that they are the Volt squad, and Jae-min actually stole their work. How could he forget his face so easily? And it's not a shame. The guy is disinterestedly interested in the fact that really he is still talking to him about work. He thought they had closed the subject. The man gives him a choice. The first option is to die. The second is to get on all fours and start barking like a dog, asking for forgiveness. The interlocutor crosses his arms over his chest and adds that he will also have to put them in order every day. If the guy behaves well, then Volt will take him as a servant. However, Jae-min even listens to him, turns around and wishes him good luck. Opus puts his hand to the portal in the tree, and a large green hole grows from a small point. Jae-min finally says that he has absolutely no time for these people. The next second he disappears. The system reports that the player has entered the royal chambers of a hidden dungeon. The information window also gives out how to pass it. The player needs to find the King of Death, fast asleep somewhere in the chambers. The player will not be able to leave this place until the king's knees touch the floor. The execution time is 30 minutes. If the player does not meet the deadline, then his soul will be forever imprisoned in the king's chambers. There is no reward for passing. Jae-min is quite happy with everything, but the Constellation is outraged by the lack of a reward. The countdown begins. The guy goes forward through the tunnel, and suddenly hears screams behind him. Turning around, he sees the Volt squad. These turn out to be the apprentices of the boss of the squad, who pushed them after the brazen player. They decide to find Jae-min and kill him. You don't have to look for long. He's standing right in front of them with a skeptical expression on his face. The man points a finger at him and orders him not to try to escape if life is precious. Do they really think the boss sent them to kill him? However, the opponents are determined. They point batons at him, emitting an electric current. Hyun-seok is looking for an object that can reverse the flow of suffering, but the guy stops her. Volt begins to mock the player, who is addressed to his constellation as to his mother. There is a